Okay, great. Well, welcome this evening, everybody. So excited to have you here. This is our second Queer Leadership Vision Forum here at the Bard Queer Leadership Project. I'm John Weinstein, Provost and Vice President here at Bard College and Sinodrug and the founding leader of BQLP. So excited to have you here for this event. We are really honored to have Paula M with us tonight for an exciting conversation around queer leadership in various elements. And to introduce Paula, I would love to hand it over to my colleague, Carla Stephens, who is the director of the Bard Queer Leadership Project, who will do the introduction. Over to you, Carla.
Thank you. Good evening. Paula Neira holds both a law degree and a nursing degree, but she didn't grow up thinking that she'd be interested in either field. Neira graduated with distinction from the United States Naval Academy in 1985 and served primarily as a surface warfare officer until 1991, when she came to terms with her gender identity. At that point in time, serving as an openly transgender woman in the Navy was not an option, leading her to leave the Navy and begin a career in nursing. Neira served as an ER nurse for 5 years before attending law school. After completing an accelerated program at Thomas M. Cooley Law School, Neira relocated to Washington to pursue an opportunity with the Service Members Legal Defense Network, the SLDN, now known as the Modern Military Association of America. She served as a staff attorney and subsequently on SLDN's board of directors and as the co-chair of its military advisory committee. In her time at SLDN, Neira helped lead the efforts to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. As a leading expert on transgender military service, she helped lead the efforts to change the regulations that allowed for open transgender service in 2016, before President Trump reversed the new policy in early 2017. Neira began working for Johns Hopkins Medicine as the nurse educator in the Department of Emergency Medicine in 2008. With the founding of the Johns Hopkins Center for Transgender Health in 2017, she serves as its inaugural clinical program director. In that role, Paula works with senior leadership to oversee an interdisciplinary service line that is aimed at providing comprehensive care for transgender people. Paula strives to match patients with the services they need and improve the health system's ability to provide culturally and clinically competent care for the LGBTQ+ community. Additionally, Neira has served as the secretary on the board of directors for GLIMA, Health Professionals Advancing LGBTQ+ Equality. Now for the fun fact. Among her many other accomplishments, Paula is proud to be a co-sponsor of the USNS Harvey Milk. Woo! This seems sadly appropriate since Harvey Milk, the famous gay rights activist and San Francisco politician who was assassinated in 1978, served as an officer in the U.S. Navy during the Korean War and chose to resign instead of facing a court-martial for being homosexual. All right?
Well, thank you. I used to joke that that was the example of an unfocused adulthood, and that someday I'd figure out what I want to do when I grow up. And now that I'm older, I still haven't grown up. It's really that is been blessed with the opportunity to be in places to work with a lot of other really good people to make a difference. And people would say, look, nurse, lawyer, naval officer, what's that got in common? And all of those professions are service professions. Is that those professions exist to really try to help other people. And that's the common thread. And again, being a little bit older now, it's when I first left the Navy and when I first started working at SLDN, you know, when I would tell the story, I would say that when I left the Navy, and I admit that's the hardest thing I've done in my life, and for context, my parents both died in my arms when they passed, and I've been in the middle of a minefield. Yet the hardest thing I've ever done was say, I gotta go to be me. It's, you know, I said, well, I gave up my calling. And I didn't give up my calling. I gave up my career in uniform. Because the calling, you know, that sense of purpose was much broader. But it took years to be able to realize that. Is that, you know, the calling is service. It's, you know, finding ways to try to make, you know, here in the United States, better for people. And then on a larger scale, trying to make the world a little bit better place for everybody. That's really what my calling has been. And I've just found different ways to do it. And, you know, I always consider myself blessed that I got a chance to do that. So that's what brings me here tonight with you folks.
So, I've had the opportunity to talk to you a few times since we were introduced by my former United States Naval Academy roommate, Bernie Bradley, who, hi Bernie, who I've invited to view, to live stream. So you've been clear about this, about what the Navy means to you. So, and you've just said how difficult it was to make the decision you made. So it just, how did you know when it was the right, when you got to that point where you had to be, that you had to kind of align your gender identity and your physical stuff?
Yeah, it's, you get to the point where you realize that you have to be you. And you can't run away from you. And you know, one of the stories that I share is that, you know, I knew that something was off about my gender. That I wasn't, you know, like the other little boys. And we're talking about 1971. So no vocabulary, you know, and a half century ago, the world was really different. So no vocabulary, hey, there's something different about it, but I can't get it. By the time I was 11, and then later on, as a little bit older teenager, I realized it was an issue of gender. And when I mentioned it to my mom really freaks out. It was beyond her comprehension, beyond her frame of reference. And immediately you learn that, hey, this is bad, you don't want to be one of those people, and I still didn't know who those people were. But I knew who, you know, that, okay, there's something about me. But at that same point in my life, I, you know, crystal clear knew that I wanted to be an officer in the United States Navy. And those two things were not compatible. So it's, okay, I'm not going to deal with who I am. I'm going to put it on the shelf. I'm going to compartmentalize it so that I can concentrate on, you know, getting to the Naval Academy, you know, being an officer in the Navy. And one day when I was on my first ship, we did a security drill, and I got issued a rifle with live ammunition, because that was the way we did those drills. And I was on part of the ship all by myself. There was nobody else around. And out of the blue, the voice says, you know, you can load this weapon, you can blow your brains out. And all the pain, all the confusion stopped. And my reaction was, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. You can imagine what Whiskey Tango Foxtrot is. Is, you know, where did that come from? And now, with reflection, is, you know, that was God talking to me, you know, the universe talking to me. And it was basically saying is that, you know, you're running on fumes. You eventually are going to have to deal with yourself. You're going to eventually have to figure out you. And, you know, that was the impetus that said, okay, hey, yeah, maybe I've got to start thinking about this. when I was young, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I wanted to fly jets, like everyone wants everybody else wants to the name like that, he wants to fly jets. Because that's, it's the Maverick stuff, that's the sexy stuff. They make movies about that. You don't really make movies about a lot of other things. And eventually I got accepted into flight school. And when I got to flight school, I realized that that was not going to solve the gender issues. And because of the length of obligated service you accrue, it meant spending an entire career trying to hide who I was. Now, I never wanted to leave the Navy. My plan was 30 years, retire, go enjoy living on the beach someplace. So it wasn't that, leaving the Navy, it was I couldn't continue to be me. And if I said the wrong thing to the wrong person once, it would have ended my career. And at that time, if you could get to 20 years, you would get a retirement. But the Navy was kicking out queer people if they had 19 years and 11 months of service, and they found out, they were kicking people out. And when you get kicked out at 19 years and 11 months, you don't get a pension like that. And they had a way that, okay, if you served more than 6 years, you would get money. If you got kicked out for being gay, they cut that amount that they would give you in half. Solely out of animus. No other reason. That was the world that I was serving. And when I finally said, is that, hey, I need to be me. And it meant giving up another part of me to do that. But, I never knew if that voice was going to come back, and maybe this time, swallowing a sidearm would be a better option. And I wasn't going to risk that. There were more things to do. And yeah, it was tough. And I definitely, have paid the price for that because I've never dealt with the psychological impact of that decision for years. Because in the military, we don't talk about asking for help for emotional or psychological things. That was very strong in the culture now, 30 years ago. It's still a part of military culture today. So it took me 30 years to finally say, hey, I need to deal with this. And the way that I did deal with it in the 90s was I let myself get out of shape. I mean, I don't have a svelte, body, and my military bearing these days stinks. But as long as I was out of shape, as long as I could meet the height weight standards, run as far as I needed to, do as many sit-ups and stuff like that I needed to do, I couldn't serve. And that was enough to take the edge off. Because if I'd stayed in shape and kept meeting all the standards I've been meeting, since I was 18, the only reason why I couldn't serve would have been because of these policies that were grounded in nothing but ignorance and prejudice. And that was too much to bear.
So you became a lawyer.
So I became a nurse because it's like, okay, hey, I got to do something. And, at the time, I didn't want to go, it's like, well, do I want to go to medical school? No, I don't want to go to school for 7 years. No. Is law school? Yeah. You want to get a job and, make some money. And nursing, the way nursing is structured is that you can get an associate's degree and then take your license exam. And then once I was a registered nurse, then I could get my employer to pay for my additional education. So I got them to pay for my bachelor's degree and got them to pay for my master's degree. But then went to law school. And it's, while I hung up my uniform, I never left the Navy. But when people ask me, who is Paula? The first answer is not about my sexual orientation, my gender identity. And I always say is that, those parts of who I am are as important to me as my eye color. And what I mean by that is, they're part of who I am. They're not things that I chose. I've come to understand myself better. I'm not ashamed of that. But that isn't what drives me. And, what drives me, what's gotten me into working so hard to change the Navy, and I always say the Navy, obviously I mean the military, or to try to make advances in healthcare for the LGBTQ plus community broadly, but specifically for transgender and gender expansive folks, is the oath that I took when I was 18 is, when you swear to support and defend the Constitution and bear true faith and allegiance to it, when people are denied access to scientifically based, medically necessary health care, when they're denied their rights, and when we talk about health, we mean, think of every dimension of your life that impacts your health. Being able to have a job, being able to live someplace safe, being able to go to school safe, being able to walk down the street, being able to have your government say you are just as worthy as anybody else. And when all of that's denied simply because of somebody else's ignorance and bigotry, that offends the Constitution. And I swore I'd do something about it. And I'm one of those veterans that doesn't think that that oath ended, the obligations ended when I wore my uniform. That was a lifetime oath. And now that I'm 60, and it's in some ways is that it is satisfying knowing that I'm still doing stuff that relates all the way back to 42 years ago.
So if I can follow up on this policy, the kind of the policy changes, I'm really interested in hearing about the work with Servicemen's Legal Defense Network and the overturning of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That was my own coming out, came around the time of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and activism around that is one of my kind of earliest pieces within the community. Just interested to hear, and for our audience to hear about the processes of that. Again, this is very familiar for certain generations, but for some of our younger members, this is rather in the past. So I'd really hear about what their work was like, and also, I mean, it was really a case of a policy change and cultural changes in the country. This is not, of course, sadly things don't always go in an upward direction, they move up and down, but it's really interesting to hear about that work then, and also just in the context of other things that might come since then.
Well, yeah, and thinking about, talking about younger folks today, the positive is, there are folks that have joined the military after those policies changed, and they're now halfway through a full military career. They're now, mid-level officers, they're now more senior non-commissioned officers that know nothing but being in a service that accepts them. And, that's a wonderful thing, that, that amnesia of, I don't know what it's like to have to live in the closet. Unfortunately, the realization is that those rights, that progress is now currently threatened. When you look back historically, we was having a conversation with some folks earlier that, the first person who got kicked out of the military for being gay happened during the Revolutionary War. So it's not like queer people have not been part of the U.S. military since before there was a U.S. military. The very foundations. And they've always served, and military people always knew that. And I'll make a distinction between LGB and T. So there were different policies. It's only in World War I is when the policies really start about actively trying to kick out gay folks. So I'm going to use gay as an umbrella term. And there were different policies over the years, up until the time, say, the Reagan administration. So the military that I joined, their policy was very simple. Homosexuality is incompatible with military service. That was it. And there were witch hunts. And, one of the books that I recommend people read is Conduct Unbecoming by Randy Schultz. There's no one who can be prouder of having served and infiltrated me. When I read that book, I was ashamed that I was part of an institution that would treat its own people that way. So there was that lot of fear. And then when Bill Clinton ran for president, he made the promise that he would change it, and there was a big political firestorm. And politically, it was mishandled, in my opinion. So the policy of don't ask, don't tell was supposed to be a compromise. It was supposed to be that, okay, we're going to let you stay as long as you stay in the closet. We're not going to ask you if you don't tell us. We're not going to pursue you. We're not going to harass you. And it was never implemented that way. Because, you know, the asking always happened is you come in on a Monday morning after a weekend, and your shipmates ask you, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Who'd you go out with? If you answer that question honestly, you're going to get kicked out. So it forced people to constantly compromise their honor just to be able to stay in service. And it also constantly compromised the honor of the institutions. Is all the military services have core values. The Navy's are honor, courage, and commitment. But they don't talk about honor and integrity. Well, there is no honor when you ask people to lie. When in everything else you ask people to be honest, you have to be honest in the military. People's lives depend on it. But tell us the truth about everything else, but lie to us about this. Yeah. And there's no moral courage in enforcing policies that you knew were grounded in ignorance and prejudice. So that was the life in the 90s, and then Service Members Legal Defense Network comes to the forefront, being the leading organization. There are many people and many organizations that were involved in this. It wasn't, you can't point to one person and say, okay, they got this done, or one organization and say they got this done. It took a team. What I'll say within the larger queer community is the people that brought about the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell were military queer people, because the broader community did not get involved. This was not a top priority for most of the community, because historically, we talk about the gay rights movement, Stonewall in 1969, even though there were protests and activism before that, that was also the Vietnam era. So the community, on the political spectrum is seen as being more on the left side, which is noted for being anti-military, not very supportive of military and military people. So the broader community was not heavily involved in this. So it really was folks mostly directly impacted by it that eventually convinced the larger community that this was important for them. It's, yes, it's about honor, it's about integrity, it's about service, all that sort of stuff. But who do you think the largest employer in the United States is of queer people? It's the Department of Defense. And if the Department of Defense can discriminate against queer people, then every other company can too. So that's why it became important to do. Now, how do you get rid of this policy? And it wasn't just a policy, it was actually a law. So it wasn't just something that a new president could come in, sign an executive order, and get rid of it. Kind of what happened with the transgender military service. You saw during the Obama administration, the Department of Defense itself said, okay, we've looked at this. There's these policies that we've had for decades really don't work. We're going to allow people to serve. And then you had a change in administration, and immediately for political reasons, they wanted to change that. So you needed to change the law. So how do you change the law? Well, either the Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional, or you change the law, get Congress to do something. So it was a long slog to get the law changed. And now we're talking the turn of the century. When I always say that, I say turn of the century, it's like, well, in 1900, it's like, no. We're a different century. Again, how do you do this? How do you create a strategy that will win? And I know that there are a lot of transgender folks that will say, well, we got thrown under the bus, and we got left out, because Don't Ask, Don't Tell didn't do anything about transgender service. And I always say, if you want to blame somebody, you literally can blame me. I was one of the people that was involved in coming up with the strategy, advising about the strategy. Because I understood that you had to be strategic about how this was going to happen. And I wasn't the decision maker. I was, I got to opine. And you had to attack it on the basis of sexual orientation because that's what the law was grounded in. Is you just get the opportunity to serve. You don't go after benefits. You don't go after marriage. You're all in one thing. Because once you're able to serve, then being denied benefits, then being denied marriage equality becomes even more hypocritical, and the military couldn't stand for that. And there's a reason why DOMA fell after Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and one of the things that the court cited was military families. So you just get open service for lesbian, gay, and bisexual folks. Then you can work on transgender service. Because if you conflated the two of them, you wouldn't have gotten the political passage of the end of the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because people would have conflated the two. And you likely would have gotten what the Republicans in this House are trying to do right now, is trying to pass a law that would have barred transgender people from serving. It wouldn't have been an executive policy anymore. Now it would have been a law. And you would need to now go through that entire process of getting the Supreme Court to overturn it or getting Congress to say something. To change the law. And frankly, the transgender community does not have that kind of political clout. So we'd still be with a Don't Ask, Don't Tell in place and a law for transgender service. So that was the strategy then, and then eventually it changed. And now we have folks that are able to serve authentically. But again, that's under challenge. Well, long-winded answer to a simple question.
As a follow-up piece to that, and I'll send it back over there. I think that this is something in working with younger activists and what they want to do, this balance of the idealism and the strategy, practicality of it, is a key piece, right? And how, as a leader in these areas, would you advise someone engaging in activism kind of for the first time and having to figure out how they're going to balance those, and when do you give up a piece or give up a piece for now so to get something later? How would you advise on that?
You have to be able to kind of take a step back. And the hardest lesson I think that people have to learn when they want to do this kind of work is that justice, sometimes never happens. Folks that are suffering an injustice, and again, this is across the board, all kinds of intersectionality, any marginalized group, is justice is never going to come fast enough. And then for some people, it's never going to come at all. Because it's going to take so long that their lifetimes, their ability to enjoy the benefit is going to go away. I'm sitting here as an example of that. Yes, the world changed, but I was too old. And it was for the next generation to be able to reap the benefit of that. And that often happens. And that stinks. That's painful on a personal level. It's painful. But also knowing that you have to have that delayed gratification is you can't indulge in the emotion. You can't be driven. You have to be passionate about having a vision. But you can't let your passion cloud thinking strategically. Because you have to, the goal is to win. And that's a long-term goal. So you have to, kind of not indulge the ego of wanting to feel the emotion of righteous anger. Yes, you should feel righteous anger. But then you need to channel that anger into how can I make change that's going to achieve what I want to achieve. And it's incremental, folks. And again, talking to young folks that are passionate about something and want to see, they see the injustice and they want to see the change now, is you can't be utopian in your ideas. Yes, the systems are racist. Yes, the systems are cis-heteronormative. They're broken. But if you run around saying, let's just scrap it, and replace it with what? And is there the political will to do that kind of revolutionary change? No. So you have to think in terms of evolution, not revolution. You also have to take care of yourself. These are long fights. You have to know when it's okay to step back and let somebody else carry the load. And be determined that you're going to stay in the fight, but that there are going to be times when you need to take care of yourself. And you have to practice self-care, because it is really draining. And then you have to be absolutely resolute. You know, when you think about trying to fight to try to change, to really bring justice to people, you only have two options. You either fight or you quit. And that's it. There is no third option. So you have to be determined. And again, it takes, you know, you always have to adopt the long view, and that sometimes doesn't feel really good. But if you look at history, you look at, you know, affecting major societal and cultural change, and that's what you're talking about, is, you know, again, it happens in increments. It happens in fits and starts. And this is going to be no different.
So, at Johns Hopkins, what was it activism that pushed Johns Hopkins towards creating the gender equality, the transgender equality?
I mean, Johns Hopkins has a checkered history with the LGBTQ community, and we recognize that. And that checkered history comes from certain individuals that are affiliated with Johns Hopkins who have personal opinions about LGBTQ plus people. And their personal opinion has been imputed to the organization. And the world's, you know, the organizations, you know, have changed. You know, we're talking about some events that happened 50 years ago when I was in high school. And in creating the Center for Transgender Health back in the 2016 timeframe, is some of our surgeons had worked with a surgeon at one of the other local hospitals that was doing gender affirming care, and said, how come we're not doing this at Hopkins? And what people don't understand is that the first gender affirming surgery done in academic medicine was done at Johns Hopkins in the 1960s. We had one of the first gender clinics in the country, closed in 1979 amidst a bunch of controversy. And then you have this period where people got care, but it wasn't done in a thoughtful, coordinated way. We didn't do surgeries. So the surgeon said, hey, why aren't we doing this? At the same time, you know, I've been involved in doing the work with the military, and one of the rationales that the military used for dragging their feet was, well, none of our doctors know how to do this. And I said, you're absolutely right, because we don't teach this stuff in school. And it also applies on the civilian side. So, you know, getting involved in trying to raise cultural awareness about the community across the disciplines, and particularly in nursing. So I'm over here working on this, the surgeons are here. Our senior leadership said, hey, wait a second, if we're going to do this, you know, gender affirming care is more than just doing surgery. It's comprehensive. And as a leading academic medical center, if we're going to do this, we need to look at it comprehensively. So we spent a year studying, okay, what are our strengths? What are the weaknesses? What are things we have to pay attention to? You know, we interacted with the community. We did some focus groups at some transgender health conferences, did some online surveys, you know, and then in 2017 launched what we call an interdisciplinary service line, which means that the care is provided by the different departments because it was the right thing to do. And it's grounded in our mission, which is patient care, education, and research. And we do this care because we know it's what the science and the evidence and the best practices show. We know this is effective. We know that whether or not gender affirming care is effective is not a legitimate debate. And if you're going to lead, you have to get involved in doing it.
So, you say it isn't a debate, and so this is always very difficult for me, is trying, so there's a lot of loud voices that, that are spreading disinformation. So how are you louder, or how do you spread the truth against this wave of disinformation?
Well, yeah, I think it's, you be consistent. Science always evolves, and intellectually, absolutely intellectually honest, is that there's always more research to do. There's always things to find out more about. The reality though is that gender affirming care is no different than cardiology or orthopedics. Is the same level of evidence that underpins gender affirming care underpins all the other areas of medicine. It's wanting to treat this differently. When I say that there's no legitimate debate, there's 40 years of evidence that shows gender affirming care is effective and benefits. People have a better quality of life. There is no argument about that. Yet you can go see where people say, oh, people that have had this have poor outcomes, and that's just not true. It's gaslighting. So what you need to do is that when they say that, you say, no. Here's the reputable science, and don't let people engage in junk science. Don't let people engage in gaslighting. Look to reputable sources, and in this debate, and right now, there's lots of passion, lots of political motivation around providing care to adolescents. Yes, how to do that most effectively is a conversation to have. Whether or not you do it is not a conversation to have. Is for all the same things, is that we know that allowing somebody to be their authentic self, to be able to access medically necessary care, is a best practice. It's grounded in science. It's not just a whim. And those who oppose that don't have reputable science to point to back up their opinions, because their opinions aren't grounded in science. They're grounded in religiosity and politics. Is because it's the worldview of that queer people should not be accepted in society. And it's aligned with, a party in a broken political system where you have politicians either who believe that worldview or who cynically say that, hey, if we use queer people as a scapegoat, we're going to get people to vote for us in elections. And that's where we're at in the country right now. And it's not a matter of yelling louder, because if you're yelling at each other, nobody's listening. And it's really a matter of trying to find out what people are afraid of.
Right.
Because that appeal, using transgender folks as a scapegoat, is really appealing to people's fear and ignorance. And it's to find out what they're afraid of. And then be able to have that conversation of why their fear is not rational. Why that fear is not justified. And you're going to move, most people are good people. Most people are ignorant because it's not something, unless it's in their daily life, they don't pay attention to it. Those are the folks that you have the conversation with. And you talk about how do you do long-term stuff, is you find the people that you can move and have a conversation with, and you have a conversation with them. And the other extreme, your opposition, that are never going to change their mind, you don't waste time fighting them. And then you get engaged. We all have to be engaged citizens. We was talking yesterday. Everybody today. I took an oath to defend the Constitution. When I was younger, I defended it against foreign enemies, and I did it by the sword. Now, all of us are at a point in our country's history where all of us are going to have to defend those values by being engaged citizens and voting. We really are at an inflection point. our democracy, not just the rights of queer people, but the rights of lots of people, are directly threatened. And being engaged citizens, being committed to not letting the big lie go unchallenged. Doesn't mean you got to out yell them. It just means you say that that's not true. Here's the evidence that shows what you just said is not valid. And you do it all the time, every time. And then on election day, you show up. And that's really important, particularly when we talk about younger folks. Now, I know some of you aren't old enough to vote yet. Some of you are. Generally, older people vote more than younger people. Well, this is directly impacting your future. Because I'm going to be with the other dinosaurs in the tar pit soon enough, and you're going to be here a lot longer. So unless you want to spend a long, long time trying to regain the rights that some of us that are older have fought to obtain and today enjoy, you may not have that opportunity. And that's why you need to get engaged.
So now if Paula were a teenager looking to go into the Navy now, that would be possible. That stays possible. But what advice would you give to that later generation version of yourself who was going to be going into the military as an openly trans person?
The advice we give is that you're going to be embarking on a really fantastic, worthwhile life. And take advantage of all the opportunities that are going to come to you. I look back at my time as a midshipman, and I could have studied harder. And I graduated with distinction. I'm in the top 100 of my class, all that kind of stuff. I still could have done more. I could have done better. I could have, took part in some opportunities that were afforded to me, and I said, I don't want to do that. That's what I would do, is, and live life, dance, eat the cupcake. As an ER nurse, I've seen my fair share of people die in front of me in an emergency room. And not one of those people on their deathbed said, gee, I wish I spent more time at work. They all wish that they had spent more time with their loved ones, that they had taken the opportunity to go on an adventure. And that's what I would tell that kid. That and invest in Apple and Microsoft.
Well, so I just want to kind of talk about why Rudy connected us, only, or why Rudy even contacted me, because the Pentagon just did something that about what impacted my experience at the Naval Academy. I had to leave a month before I would have graduated, because again, there was a policy that said that I couldn't be pregnant and be a single parent and be at the Naval Academy or serving in the Navy again. To be a single parent as an officer was considered conduct unbecoming of an officer, and so the Pentagon just changed the policy. So that's 40 years later, or nearly 40 years later, the Pentagon just changed the policy that it enables there to be, for midshipmen to be married and have kids. And even at the time, it was clearly unjust, because I had classmates who I knew were married. They were male, so they were married, they had kids. But I couldn't hide being pregnant as a woman. And so I didn't, so I am, one of the reasons why I am honored to be here with you because I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the emotional capacity. I was a new single mom, but to go through the fight that you went through. So, you know, my battle was different, but on behalf of people who may not have already told you, you know, I'm really thankful and proud of the service. So thank you for your service.
Thank you. I mean, that's humbling, and you know, it's been my privilege. And you know, one of the things we appreciate seeing the change over time. And you know, this is the Army Navy game is Saturday, so go Navy, get Army.
Go Navy.
When I was able to get a new diploma with my correct name on it from the registrar, drove up to the academy, and it was in June of 2016, about a week before I knew the policy was going to change. So I knew the policy change was coming. And I was walking back to my car, and if you've ever been in Annapolis in June, you know, hot, but it was early in the morning, so it was still kind of cool, but everything's green and lush. And the brigade of midshipmen wasn't there, graduation had happened, the new class hadn't come on board yet. So it was fairly quiet. And as I was walking back to my car, I started thinking of everything, the music, the Naval Academy alma mater, Navy blue and gold, and the football fight song, Anchors Away. Navy is the only place where the football fight song talks about honor. And I said to myself, I said, hey, wait a second. And our alma mater talks about that by the service we're called away and scattered far and wide. And we've always thought about that. I joined the Navy, I joined the Marine Corps, they sent me around the world. I said, wait a second. It's what if we're really talking about service and our path of how we serve is different? I've not had a traditional career path for a typical Naval Academy grad. But I've been able to have an impact on the Navy that is absolutely expected of somebody who graduated from the Naval Academy. And the fight song, the last line of Anchors Away is, fly seven shore, we learn Navy stern call, and that's faith, courage, service, and honor. And as I walked down the car, I said, wait a second, this fight, to get it so that more people can be part of the mission, is who they are. Whether it's talking about the ability of queer folks to serve authentically, advancing opportunities for women to be able to serve in all of the opportunities and fields in the military, changing policies that rob the military of really good people for stupid reasons. That's living a life of service. That's living honor, faith, courage. And it's very humbling to be able to sit and say, hey, wait a second. When I started, I said, that's the kind of life I want. That's who I want to be. And then later on, to be able to look backwards and say, hey, wait a second, I did do that. Didn't do it in the way that most people do it. And, and that's where, today, is always say that I've been blessed. Now, yes, I much would have rather, having a 30-year career in the Navy, retired as a senior officer, had command at sea, had more medals and all that kind of stuff. But that's ego stuff. That's not what's important. And if you're going to live a life of service, if you're going to get involved in this kind of work, it's not about what you accrue. It's about the impact that you're able to have for other people. And as an officer, and when I was talking about myself, is that I am a professional naval officer. A lot of years out of uniform. But in being part of that profession, your job is to make it better for the people that come after you. And whatever you do, whatever line of work you wind up getting into, that's really the goal, is you want to leave it so that the people that come after you don't have to fight the same fights that you have, and that they can then take what you've done and move it forward. And today also happens to be the 82nd anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Is that when we talk about a country, we talk about a flawed country, absolutely have flaws. But being a patriot doesn't mean that you gloss over the flaws, particularly if you're an American patriot. It means you recognize how flawed we were from the start. Because that's the only way we're ever going to create a more perfect union, which is what the goal is. Because you've got to see where you're falling short, and then you got to be committed to fixing it. And yeah, you got a chance to do that. You got a chance to hang out with some really good kids. Now, we didn't know each other at the academy, because the academy's student body is about 10 times the size of
Well, and it certainly wasn't when we were there. I guess my class was the largest at the time, 4,400 in Shipman.
Yeah. So we didn't know each other back then. And yeah, a mutual alumni got us together. But then, humbled they get a chance to spend time with you folks.
And I'm so grateful that mutual alumni got you two together so that we can have this time together. And I would love for us to give some time for our audience, whether here in studio audience here in the Clark Auditorium with us, or those watching on Zoom, to get to ask questions. Carla and I always have the great honor and privilege of asking many questions to our guests. But we would love to share that. So whether whichever audience space you're in, we'd love to hear the questions that you have for Paula. And when you ask your question, if you'd like to introduce yourself, we'd love to have you do that. But if you'd rather stay anonymous, you're welcome to do that as well.
Hi, Paula. So my name is Jake Aloya. I'm currently a senior here, and I'm, at least right now, on an almost eerily similar path, kind of academically, to the one that you were on. So what I'd, I guess, be interested to hear from you, currently I'm studying psychology and criminology, and I'm working as an EMT. And so my area of specialty is looking at kind of realistic and implementable reform for the mental health treatment system through emergency medicine, and focusing particularly on queer youth and adolescents in that system. And so I guess one of the things that I'd just be particularly interested to hear from you is looking at kind of a system like that, a system like the one that you're also working in, that is obviously flawed and broken. How do we go about continuing the work that has been started while kind of continuing to start new work at the same time? I feel like one of the things that I often see is this splintering of like people, finding their own different niche, which I'm subject to myself, and then pursuing that and only that, but losing the interconnectability that allows you to remain a unified force. And I think that power in numbers is really what's needed to make change on any level. So how you would, or I guess your advice, what your advice would be to approaching that?
Yeah, you hit on something that's really important in this, is that what I would say to people is don't get involved in the oppression Olympics. And I know I've heard that's a term that you folks use here. It's the notion that my people have had it worse than your people. Because the realization is that your people are my people, and my people are your people. Is that any marginalized group, the commonality is that when a majority group, some characteristic about that majority is used to justify seeing people that don't have that characteristic as less than. That's the problem. When you talk about it in terms of skin color, you're talking about race. When you talk about terms of sexual orientation or gender identity, you're talking about cis-heteronormativity. You didn't come from the same country, you're talking about xenophobia. So again, the problem is the same. Who you're targeting then gives you the rest of the vocabulary. So that's where you need to maintain that commonality. The understanding that every one of us has privilege is, yeah, I've paid, I've had a tough road. I mean, I'm not, I don't gloss over that. But I've also had it a heck of a lot easier than most people. Because, I'm well educated. I'm white. I was born here. I speak English. And all of us, in some dimension of ourselves, has privilege. So yeah, so if you're gay, but you're cisgender, you got cisgender privilege. And the trick is to figure out how do you use your dimensions of privilege to make it better for the folks that don't have that dimension. And like with the broken systems, let's talk about being incremental, is that, yeah, people say, well, I want to tear down the system. And my answer is always, how many artillery battalions do you have? Because no system has ever changed, unless by force, unless you've changed it from the inside. And you make a small change. You find what's common. You advocate for the change. You implement the change. You see that the world doesn't fall apart. And you make the next change. Then you make the next change. And it takes a long time. But like in emergence, like in the EMT world, is recognizing that you're dealing with people that are in mental health crisis often. And how do you provide those folks out in the field with the tools to be able to recognize it and de-escalate situations as opposed to escalate them? Something as simple as that is a way to start effect change.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kirsten. For those who don't know me, I'm the program manager for the Center of Equity, Inclusion, and Community, and also work with BQLP, and I have had the absolute joy of spending time with Paula today. And I was wondering, this is one of the first things I asked her, about being the godmother of a ship, and what does that title mean?
So every ship in the Navy has one or more people that are the sponsors of the ship. And in our naval tradition, those are generally been women. And usually if the ship's named after somebody, it's one of their relatives. If it's not named after a person, it's usually the wife of a high government official, or it's a woman who's a high government official. And then there's me. I'm not related to Harvey Milk, but basically following on in his footsteps, trying to carry on his work, and the Secretary of the Navy with me. So I'm the person that broke the champagne bottle on the bow of the ship. You can watch it on YouTube. You can even hear my speech. You can watch the whole thing. It's there online. And the charge is that I imbue the ship and the crew with my personality, my spirit, my character. And I always, feel bad for my crew because I used to be a surface warfare, so I know what their life is like. So it's, they can't pull one on me. And the good side about it is I know what their life is like. I do know what the sacrifices that they endure. But in trying to explain what that is all about to my civilian colleagues that know nothing about the Navy, as I mentioned, that it's like being the godmother for the crew. And in the civilian world, like cruise liners have sponsors too, and the terms that they use is godmother and godfather. So when my colleagues heard that I'm the godmother, I'm the godmother of the ship, they immediately started thinking bippity boppity boop, fairy godmother, great wishes. And it was like, no. I am the godmother. My last name ends in a vowel, and I'm from northern New Jersey. I give offers, I make offers that can't be refused. That's the godmother.
Now, I heard you say that you were going to spend time writing Christmas cards for your crew members.
Yes. And yes, so that's what it is, because I want everybody on the crew, and there's about 100 people in the crew, to know one of the privileges of being the sponsor is that I get to represent everybody else. And letting those folks know that the sacrifices that they're making and their families are making for us is recognized and it's appreciated. And one simple way to do it is, to send people a holiday card to just say that, hey, thanks for what you're doing, have a great holiday, somebody's out here thinking about you.
In thinking about this, you said you're not related to Harvey Milk, but certainly not only in the LGBTQ plus community, but certainly within the community, we talk a lot about chosen family. I would sort of argue that you are part of Harvey Milk's family. You are one of the family members in this lineage of key activists who've made change for the community. I think that's kind of a sort of a perfect match. I also love for you to be my godfather. So they're super lucky.
Yeah, and that's what, one of the things that Secretary Mavis, who was the Secretary of the Navy, that named me to this, is wanted to have a transgender woman who was a sponsor, because that hadn't happened. I'm the first one in the history of the Navy that's done that. And really sending that message again about family. And that's the things that I talked about at the christening and at the dinner the night before is, that notion of that the Navy is a family. And queer people have been part of that family forever. And it's, we need to recognize that. And we need to take care of each other. And then the other thing that Harvey talked about coming out and about hope. The hope for the us's is, and that, Harvey Milk, yes, he's an LGBTQ plus icon and, gay rights leader, but he saw the intersectionality of it. He saw that any marginalized group detracts from all of us. And he also very clearly called for folks to be engaged, for folks to come out, because you only have the rights that you're willing to defend. You only have the right that you're willing to stand up and say, I'm here and I'm willing to pay a price for it. And I was talking with some of the folks earlier that, coming out is a highly individualized decision. And it's got to be made from a position of strategy and not fear. Because freedom is not free. I mean, it sounds like a trite crusade, but it's absolutely true. And you have to, if you're going to be free, if you're really going to live an authentic life and be free, you have to come to terms with what price am I willing to pay for my freedom. Yes, it should be a birthright. Yes, human rights should be inherent and people shouldn't have to fight for them. But that's not reality. So what price am I willing to pay to be my authentic self? And again, because I'm one of these sappy patriots and I was a history major when I was at school, is, when I made that term about coming out, well, if I come out, I might lose my job. Or if I come out, what are the neighbors going to think? Or maybe, my family's going to disown me. Or maybe I'm going to get beat up or worse. That it may cost me my life if I live authentically as who I am. Well, the price of freedom, here in the United States at least, was that we were willing to pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. I could get killed. I could lose my job. People might not think highly of me. So if in the founding of this flawed and wonderful country, that was the price, it's the same price today. And each of us have to be willing to say, hey, I'm going to pay that price. And if you're not willing to pay the price, you kind of lose your chance to complain about not having it. And I know that that's martialistic. I know that that's a voice of privilege at times. But it gets back to that if you've got the privilege, if you've got the ability to stand up and fight, you got to stand up and fight for the folks that can't. It gets back to that oath stuff. So, 60 years later, I'm still doing the same stuff I was doing when I was 18. I just wear different clothes. What else you got?
My name is Francis. My question is, well, context. In the future, well, right now I'm in first year and I'm a pre-med major. I'm aiming to go into the medical field in the future. And I was just worrying more over, in the future, being a medical professional, what can I do to be able to advocate for my patients, just and elevate their voices, especially within queer and trans community and such.
Yeah, it's realize that the needs of the community have to be part of medical education. And realize the power you have as a student, as a student to say that, hey, you need to teach this to me. And if the medical school isn't teaching it to you, to advocate for that, to advocate for this to be just part of medical education. And you can't create, there's so much information that you have to learn in any of the health professions. There are only so many hours in the curriculum that you just can't add on more mandatory stuff. So you have to find ways to infuse it across the curriculum and to advocate for that so that this isn't an add-on. Because if you create the LGBTQ plus health course, first off, people are going to self-select. And really the people who need to get the information are never going to take the course. And again, there's only so many hours in the day. And that's the way that you do it. And when we talk about lived experience, there is a role for lived experience alongside expertise and the professionalism. And when we talk about like the community, nothing about us without us, kind of thing, is that yes, people need to share their lived experience because telling stories is what makes the human connection and motivates people to change systems when they see the impact it has on people. But the other thing is, don't equate one person's lived experience with years and years and years of research and experience, because we're all experts in ourselves. And like for me, I would never hold myself out as the example of all transgender people. With my experience, it's been really weak. And but the collection of stories and recognizing that the older hierarchical, I'm the healthcare provider and I know everything, and you're the patient and you know nothing. That dynamic we need to work together. I have professional expertise that you're relying on, and I need to provide you with my best judgment. And then together, we're going to come up with a path. Now, you may agree with my judgment, or you may not agree with my judgment. That's up to you. But we can try to find, a way to solve whatever the issue that you're coming to me for my expertise is, as a physician, together. That's going to be the best for you and your health. And that answer is going to be different for everybody.
Other questions out in our audiences?
I know we talked about this earlier, but I want to just reiterate. So a lot of queer people have different ideas and views and feelings on American military systems. So my question again. So how can queer people find identity as well as empowerment through military as you have?
We were talking earlier that, obviously for me sitting here, I am who I am because I was in the military. And, that military experience isn't for everybody. There are definitely people who should never spend a day in the military. And the sooner they realize that, the better it is for everybody. It is not alike for everybody. For those who do follow that path, first of all, people join the service for all kinds of reasons. Most people, I say, are motivated by patriotism, wanting to serve their country to some degree. Some people, more than others. But it's also an avenue of opportunity. For many people, it's the way to get out of a dysfunctional family situation, to be able to get out of poverty, to be able to pursue education. All of that's real, and it's valid. But it's a one-way transition that I said. Most people join the military when they're young, 17, 18, 19, early 20s. The military does a very good job of taking civilians and enculturating them into a very specific culture. Each of the branches of service are a little bit different. The Army is not like the Navy. We superior. We have evidence to prove it, but you don't. But yeah, but then at the other end, we still don't do a very good job of getting people back to living in the civilian world. Because unless you die on active duty, I don't care if you retire after 30 years. One of my classmates just retired as the chief of naval operations, the senior admiral in the Navy. He's wearing civilian clothes now. You all go back to that world, and we don't have the tools in place to really make that an easy transition. From personal experience, I've had I still wrestle with that transition, and it's been 30 years. Because you're trying to fit back into something that is no longer who you are. And the empowering part is that you realize you've had the experience of being able to be part of something much bigger than yourself. And you learn the ability to work with other people. You learn the importance of contributing to a mission. Again, that is beyond just, me getting rich, me being, worried just about me. And those are the upsides of being in the military. And it's, the notion that amongst us, there have to be people that are willing to make those sacrifices for the greater good. And that you get a chance to learn a lot. And, if I hadn't gone to the Naval Academy, I wouldn't be sitting here with you tonight, if you want to be really specific about it. Because I wouldn't have met the people that I met. I wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to do the work. And that's my story, and I think most veterans, not every veteran had a good time in the service. Not every veteran looks back on their service time fondly, by any stretch of the imagination. Everybody's experience will vary a little bit. But most folks look back on it as a time that they're very proud of. And when people come up and say, thank you for your service, veterans wrestle with that as, what does that mean? And my response is always, it was a privilege. And thank the person for their support of it. So I think there's definitely, a value in that life. And, anybody that's thinking about that life, I would encourage them to go explore it. The negatives get outweighed by the benefits all the time, in my opinion.
I think we are nearing the end of our time, and I do want to give each of us up here to have kind of one sort of final word, so you can think about what that might be. While we're doing that, I would like to thank all of you for being here, both here in our space and those out beyond watching us from afar. And I wanted to thank our team who helped us with the behind-the-scenes piece to make this event happen. Thank you, Monk. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Kirsten, for making that possible. I think I'll give my last word, then I'll pass it over to Carla, and then we always like to get our guests have their final word. Something that I was really thinking of, it came from this last question. One of our goals here at the Bar Crew Leadership Project is to elevate LGBTQIA+ people in all elements and areas of the workforce. So we're trying to really elevate leadership that way. And I think a kind of flip side of that is to also bring all areas of the workforce into LGBTQIA-ness. So in thinking about some areas that may seem more sort of historically affiliated with the LGBTQIA+ community, and some that have seemed maybe less inclusive or less involved, we need to be in all those spaces, right? Because we want to have queer people everywhere in all of these worlds and be able to succeed and thrive in those spaces. So I'm really excited to be opening up all these different areas. So that's where I'm gonna kind of close it off. Thank you, Carla, so much for co-hosting this and for bringing Paula into our lives. Anything you'd like to say? Or any thanks you'd like to give?
Well, yes. So, as John said, thank all the folks who have. So, I've been here a minute. a little bit more than a minute. And, you know, Pauline talked about the military, you know, being family. So being welcomed into this family is way different. But wonderful in some of the same sense. So when I go out and I try to recruit young people for the BARD Career Leadership Project, one of the things that I say to them is that there's a small community and it is family. So now you are part of our family. I've been here for a minute and I've invited people. And I just wanted to also add, you know, something that you said about what the military does, if you don't mind. So I went to the Naval Academy. It was both wonderful and really terrible. And because, well, one of the things in creating a naval officer, at least in my experience, is this tearing down, right? So we go through plebe summer and you have, you know, that time that you're trying to transition someone from being a civilian to being a naval officer in the summer, in 8 weeks. And what was so important about that wasn't the tearing down, it was realizing where the core is, right? Where was that part of me that couldn't get torn down? And so if you want to challenge yourself in that way, really finding out who you are in a really difficult way, but you know, then the military builds you up into someone new, right? And I didn't have that full experience, but then I got to do the rest of the work, and so, you know, I appreciate that recognizing that is a process, and it's a process that we continue to do. So, you know, you went nurse, lawyer, you know, Navy nurse, lawyer, it's like, ooh, Navy, corporation, educator, you know. So when Paula talks about living your life, don't think that you're going to choose this one thing and that's your life. Living your life is an adventure. And so, you know, I really appreciate that we get to see how life provides opportunities and you get to pivot and you're always moving towards being your best self. And part of that, as you said, for you, is helping other people to live in a world where they can become their best selves.
And, you know, the one thing I found is that for those of you who have not seen the Godfather movies, part 1 and part 2 is much better than part 3. But part 3 does have some good dialogue. But it's, you know, the idea of being part of the family is, you know, once in, never out. And, you know, it's a different family. But you know, which says what we're about finding the core is that you have to find what your core values are. And then you have to live along with those values. So if you do that, no matter what you do, no matter what adversity you face, no matter what path your life takes, and you can have a movie script in your head, and then life is going to change. But if you stay true to those core values, you're always going to be doing the right thing. And you know, thinking of the last words of saying, well, it's, you know, 2 things. Is it, you know, if not me, who? When you see something that needs to get fixed, can't wait around on somebody else to do it. You got to step up and say, "Well, me." And then the other thing is that when the situation comes up, the notion of who will I send? You stand up and say, "Here I am. Send me." And if that's your mindset, that's that's the way things change. Is because enough people say, "This is wrong. I need to be involved." And enough people say, "Hey, if somebody's got to do it, I'll do it." And you get a bunch of people together that all think that way, ain't nothing going to be able to ever stand in your way. It may take a long time to win, but you're going to win. And it's been great getting a chance to have a part of the family. Yeah. So, I can be the crazy relative in the attic.
There's a high bar for that.
Challenge.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. We wish you well on this wintry night, and thank you for being part of this wonderful family as well. Good night.